After 6 heartbreaking years, she discovers an amazing truth that changes everything forever. Emma looked through the boxes in her mother's dusty attic, each item a reminder of the life they had carved out together, yet the space felt hollow. It was the kind of silence that weighed heavy, echoing with unfulfilled promises and buried dreams. As a nurse at Maplewood Community Hospital, she dedicated herself to healing others. Yet alone and overwhelmed, she couldn't shake the deep-seated pain of her father's absence, a wound that had festered for too long. His abrupt disappearance left a jagged hole in her childhood, one that her mother's lessons on perseverance couldn't fully mend. She picked up a scarred journal, leather cracked with age. Curiosity flickered in her chest. Could this hold the key to understanding the man who'd vanished from her life? As she flipped through the pages, her heart raced. The words leaped out at her, intense thoughts and intricate details about a world she'd only glimpsed in fragments. Betrayal, injustice, and lost potential snaked through each entry. Emma gripped the journal, feeling the weight of her father's unmet expectations pressing down on her. Was this a gift from the past, or a curse that would bind her to his failures? Emma felt the pulse of conflict in her veins. Here lay the heartache of a man she had yearned to know, juxtaposed against her own struggles. The idea of digging deeper sent shivers down her spine. Would pursuing this legacy mean following a path he had abandoned, one marked by pain? Or would it reinforce the grief and failure that shadowed her every move? She hesitated, doubt creeping in like a thief. Memories flooded her mind. Her mother's endless fight against illnesses, the mounting bills, the unwavering sacrifices. What if she risked unraveling their story for a father who may have never deserved her loyalty? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Determination burned within her as Emma wrestled with the desire to reclaim her father's dreams while fearing the repercussions of such revelations. What would she become if she unearthed his accomplishments? Would the townspeople see her as more than just a nurse? The chilling thought struck her. What if she failed in the pursuit of his vision and stood alone, tethered by expectations no one had placed on her but herself? The air thickened with uncertainty, and Emma clenched the journal tighter, her knuckles white against the worn leather. As she pored over the last entry, a chilling realization swept over her. Her father's groundbreaking patent was just on the brink of recognition, a promise of revolution in his field. Yet the prospect of stepping into a world where she had to confront those who had silenced him sent tendrils of fear around her heart. Would this be a journey toward reclaiming her father's legacy, or would it serve as a reminder of all she had lost? The choice loomed, potent and paralyzing, leaving her teetering on the edge of a profound reckoning that could redefine everything she knew about family, loyalty, and her own capabilities. Emma's breath hitched as she stood at this crossroads, the impending decision pulsing like a living entity, thrumming with the weight of her lineage. Emma sat cross-legged on the attic floor, the journal still resting in her lap, its presence both comforting and oppressive. Each page she had turned felt like an invitation to a world both foreign and familiar. Parsing the complex emotions that swirled within her, she recognized a desperate longing, an urge to transform her pain into purpose, to take her father's fragmented legacy and weave it into something that belonged to her, something that could breathe new life into their shared history. As night cloaked the sky outside, channeling memories of conversations with her mother, she thought of the times they had discussed resilience and hope. Those lessons had equipped her to face her daily challenges at the hospital, standing by the bedsides of patients with unwavering compassion. But this was different. This confrontation meant inviting in the chaos she associated with her father's absence. Could she harness that chaos to break free from its grip? With an assertive breath, she resolved to investigate the patent further. What had been his vision? What had he wanted to accomplish? Emma envisioned herself standing in the hospital's break room, sharing her findings with colleagues, potentially inspiring others to see beyond their current lives. The thought gave her a rush, an intoxicating mix of horror and exhilaration that made her fingertips tingle. Maybe, just maybe, this was the catalyst she needed for her own evolution as a person and a professional. The next morning, amidst the predictable clatter of early shifts and the familiar scent of antiseptic, Emma sought her boss, Dr. Green, a figure she both respected and feared. Hushed conversations swirled around her as she approached his office, each step a delicate negotiation with dread. Would he question her motives? Laugh off her aspirations as mere whimsy? "Emma," he noted, freeing his attention from the reports before him. "What's on your mind?" "Dr. Green," she began, her voice steady despite the nervous heartbeat. "I need to talk to you about possibly taking on a project outside of my regular duties. It relates to something personal, something I found recently that could impact our field." His brow furrowed, and she could feel the weight of scrutiny on her shoulders, but there was a glimmer of curiosity in his eyes, a rare flicker of interest. "I'm listening." With a determined breath, she outlined her father's journal and the patent she had stumbled upon. As she spoke, Emma felt her constraints loosen, each word casting off remnants of self-doubt. Dr. Green absorbed her narrative carefully, and she watched as a calculating spark ignited behind his gaze. "This could be significant, Emma," he finally replied, "but it also opens up a lot of questions. If this patent indeed holds merit, you might have to confront some uncomfortable truths. You must be prepared for that." The words settled heavily in the room. Confrontation. She had anticipated it, but now the reality weighed so much more than her fears had prepared her for. Faces she knew, voices that surrounded her, they could easily turn hostile at the news of her father's past and her attempts to champion it. She nodded, absorbing his caution as resolve crystallized around her goal. "I'll take whatever steps necessary to ensure it's right, but I can't ignore it. What he wanted was important, and it matters." Though uncertainty still pulsed steadily in her veins, something within her buzzed with newfound ambition. It was time to rise as more than just a nurse. The possibility of becoming an advocate, a voice for her father, felt like an awakening. Emma returned to work that day not just to nurse the sick, but to confront the past and, in turn, reshape her future. As the day drew to a close and her co-workers dispersed, Emma stayed behind, poring over her father's entries again, determined to uncover the heart of his vision. But as she read, a chilling doubt surfaced. What if uncovering his legacy meant exposing the darker truths? The reasons behind his downfall? The gravity of the journey loomed ahead, decisions sharpening into focus. Emma took a deep breath, readying herself to step into uncharted territory. What awaited her would not just affect her father's story, but her own. The moment had come for her own confrontation. Little did she know, the next revelation would hit closer than she ever anticipated. Emma awoke the next morning with the weight of her father's legacy still throbbing in her mind. The shadows in her room seemed to whisper echoes of her father's past, urging her to dig deeper. She felt a potent mix of fear and responsibility. Her quest had transformed from mere curiosity into a clarion call for action. Carefully, she crafted a plan. Today was the day she would methodically chart a course through the patent documentation. Each document held fragments of her father, the man she had lost long before her understanding of him was fully formed. With a renewed sense of purpose, she gathered her things and headed to the library at the hospital, a space that had become her refuge over the years. Settling into a small nook lined with shelves of medical literature, she spread out her father's journal alongside the patent paperwork. The smell of aging paper and leather filled her senses, grounding her in the task at hand. As she flipped through the pages, pieces of his vision began to emerge. Concepts interwoven with technical jargon, but framed by a profound desire to improve patient care. With each line she read, Emma's admiration for her father swelled, yet so did her trepidation. There were explanations woven through his notes that hinted at not just innovation, but failures too. The mention of his initial failure to secure backing for the project raised the specter of rejection. She couldn't shake the idea that his ambition had cost him, in both professional and personal realms. Her thoughts circled back to Dr. Green's warning. Could she truly navigate these uncomfortable truths? As afternoon melted into evening, determination ignited within her. She wouldn't allow fear of discovery to stifle her mission. Yes, the truth might be different from the idealized version of her father she had held on to, but it was imperative to honor who he really was. The complexity of his ambitions, failures, and humanity intertwined like a tapestry. Tucking the journal under her arm, she made her way to the hospital's main desk to access more resources. It hit her then. She needed allies. Not just her father's legacy, but her own future revolved around collaboration. Cautiously, she approached Charlie, a seasoned engineer known for his innovative ideas in medical technology. "Charlie," she began, her voice quivering slightly, "I'd like to discuss a project that's, personal." His curiosity piqued. He gestured for her to sit. "I'm all ears." Emma laid out her findings, revealing the patent and her father's vision with a disarming honesty. Watching his expression shift from curiosity to skepticism, she braced herself for any dismissive remarks. Instead, he leaned forward. "This sounds like a potential revolution in patient care. Why haven't we pursued this further?" The unexpected support coursed through her veins like oxygen. They spent hours discussing factors that could contribute to the patent's success. With each suggestion Charlie made, Emma felt a growing conviction, a sense of solidarity in facing the daunting legacy her father left behind. Yet as ideas flourished, another layer of doubt flickered just beneath the surface. Emma pondered how far she would be willing to push against the current. Would she expose the less flattering aspects of her father's journey? Was she prepared to risk her reputation in an environment that thrived on upholding untarnished success stories? That night, her thoughts traversed unforeseen pathways as she mulled over the consequences of her emerging resolve. The battle between honoring her father's truth and building her professional identity became increasingly pronounced. Each question hung in the air like a weight. As she drifted into sleep, the decision loomed larger than ever. What was she truly willing to uncover for the sake of both her father's legacy and her future? Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but as she turned towards the shadows of her room, one notion rang resolutely clear. Change was not only necessary, it was inevitable. The time had come to confront not just her father's choices but her own, in a professional world that could be unforgiving. The dawn promised revelations as profound as it was stirring. But Emma could feel the storm assembling in her heart, brewing with the knowledge that her journey was just beginning. Would she emerge whole, or would the truth shatter everything she held dear? Emma awoke to the sound of her alarm, but her thoughts were miles away from the mundane routine of the morning. The gravity of yesterday's conversations lingered like a heavy fog in her mind. She felt the thrill of possibility tangled with a gnawing sense of dread about what she might unearth. How could she draw from her father's legacy without being consumed by its darkness? As she prepared for the day, her reflection in the mirror revealed not just a woman, but a dynamic tension within her. Hope wrestling with anxiety. Today, she vowed, she would take real steps to honor her father's vision while asserting her own. She needed clarity, and the library had become her sacred ground for both research and introspection. Once again, she settled into her familiar spot amidst the comforting scent of books. With her father's journal and patent documents laid before her like puzzle pieces, she felt a surge of determination. Diving deeper, she began dissecting the technical complexity of his notes. His insights hinged not just on technological advancements, but on emotional appeals that could easily speak to the heart of healthcare. But as she immersed herself in the minutiae, another troubling pattern emerged. Emma recognized a recurring theme: her father's reluctance to acknowledge his missteps. Each critique he faced led to a retreat into rigorous self-defense within his writings. Did that same fear of exposure now seep into her own thoughts? Hours passed, and Emma's resolve began to take shape. As the afternoon light shifted, a plan crystallized in her mind. She needed feedback beyond Charlie's support. She needed to confront the realities of her father's limitations directly. What if she could turn those shortcomings into lessons, a bridge toward innovation rather than a barrier? With a sudden rush of conviction, she decided to organize a small meeting with a select group of colleagues who knew her father's work well, including Dr. Green. Emma's heart raced with excitement and trepidation. Could she articulate her ideas powerfully enough to steer the conversation toward a constructive analysis of her father's legacy? The choice to present herself and her father's story authentically felt daunting, but liberating. She felt a hunger for growth, for a broader understanding of how they might collectively innovate patient care. Yet, a whisper of doubt still lingered. Would they perceive her efforts as a tribute or an intrusion into her father's story? As the meeting approached, Emma crafted her presentation with painstaking care. She focused on her father's achievements, but juxtaposed them with the realities of his struggle, his pursuit marred with setbacks that would humanize him to the audience. Her preparation took her through a labyrinth of emotions, sharpening her resolve. The night before the meeting, she found herself at a crossroads, staring into the unknown. The gamble she was taking could either validate her ambitions or lead to professional estrangement in a cutthroat environment. Yet deep down, the urge to be transparent about her father's narrative urged her forward. Would pushing through this tension pull her closer to authenticity or fracture her aspirations even further? As the dawn broke with fresh light streaming through her window, Emma felt the pulse of urgency beat within her chest. She wasn't merely the daughter of a renowned inventor, but a burgeoning figure able to carve her own path through the thorns of expectation. Encouraging collaboration within the constraints of her father's history would signal the start of her own legacy. The meeting loomed, and the question swelled. Would her truth be the key to forging a new beginning, or would it unravel her in the process? Emma stood in front of the mirror once more, adjusting her blazer and searching for the confidence she needed to convey her father's complex legacy. The uncertainty that had been brewing within her erupted into a cacophony of thoughts. What if she stumbled over her words? What if her audience rejected her perspective? She took a deep breath, reminding herself why she was here: to excavate the layers of her father's work, and to share her vision with those who had respected him. Arriving at the conference room, Emma felt the weight of potentially changing the course of her father's legacy pressing down on her. Colleagues were already gathered, exchanging curious glances in her direction, and Emma could sense their anticipation mixed with unease about her intentions. Dr. Green, seated to the front, offered a nod of encouragement, and for a fleeting moment her anxiety eased. She began her presentation by recounting her father's remarkable achievements, weaving in anecdotes that revealed not just his inventive spirit, but also the vulnerabilities he had fought to conceal. She spoke of the challenges he faced, the moments of self-doubt hidden behind his brilliant ideas. Each story peeled back a layer, transforming him from a distant figure into an accessible human being. As she transitioned into discussing the shortcomings and missteps, the atmosphere in the room subtly shifted. Eyes widened, and whispers flitted around like startled birds. Emma's heart raced, but conviction fueled her voice. His fear of failing publicly often halted the discussions that could have led to breakthroughs. But what if we turned these hesitations into conduits for collaboration? The reception was mixed. Some nodded in understanding, while others appeared visibly discomforted. She felt as if she were walking a tightrope, but deep down, there was a growing realization within her. Vulnerability was her strongest ally. Acknowledging failure could foster empathy and encourage innovative thought. Dr. Green raised a hand, interrupting her flow. "You're suggesting that we confront not only his successes, but our own reluctance to acknowledge what held back his vision?" The question hung heavily in the air, a challenge cloaked as genuine curiosity. "Yes," Emma responded. "By doing so, we embrace a path forward that honors his legacy by building on it, rather than hiding from it." She watched as the room's energy began to shift, a quiet revolution taking root among her peers. Discussions sparked, an exchange of opinions on how to innovate healthcare without repeating past mistakes. It was exhilarating yet terrifying, but she realized the potential that lay in their collective introspection. Together, they could create an environment where honesty led to progress rather than fear. As the meeting progressed, Emma's initial discomfort transformed into a shared dialogue. The barriers constructed by her father's reputation shattered, revealing the potential for collaborative growth. Yet beneath this surface triumph, a new worry surfaced. Would her colleagues truly embrace this new approach, or was this a temporary high that would fade into the traditional practices they had long adhered to? After the meeting concluded, scattered conversations cleaved through the hum of excitement. Emma was approached by one of her father's former mentees, who offered a thoughtful critique of the very arguments she had just made. "You know," he said, "your father's work was more than our common ground. It could be a cautionary tale as much as it was inspiration." The word struck Emma like a lightning bolt. It was true. Amid advancing technology lay the sharp warning of responsibility, humility, and the necessity to learn from failure. Despite the progress made, a lingering doubt clawed at her resolve. Could she maintain this momentum? Was it merely her voice echoing against the walls of past glory, or was it a clarion call for genuine transformation? Stepping back into the cool air outside the building, Emma felt the swift rush of purpose coursing through her veins. She had transcended the mere role of daughter. She was becoming a critical voice in defining and redefining innovation within healthcare. Yet the path opened up before her was fraught with ambivalence, untangling her father's shadow while amplifying her own truth. What would it take to cultivate this momentum into something real and enduring? Emma was determined to find out, but the next layer of complexity awaited her. The inevitable pushback from those comfortable in their established ways. Would she find allies willing to brave the unsettling waters alongside her? As Emma stepped away from the building, the air outside felt different, tinged with both exhilaration and anxiety. The events of the day had shifted something fundamental within her, awakening a fierce resolve she had only glimpsed before. She had shared her father's struggles and successes, and in doing so, had laid the groundwork for a potential renaissance in their work. But was it truly enough? That night, Emma lay in bed staring at the ceiling, grappling with the weight of her intentions. The dialogue in the conference room had stirred a mix of hope and resistance. While some nodded in agreement, others were entrenched in the old ways, with skepticism etched on their faces. She found herself revisiting Dr. Green's question and the former mentee's cautionary insight. Their challenges lingered like echoes, demanding further exploration. The following week presented her with an unintended consequence of her open approach: canny glances and hushed conversations. She had challenged the status quo, and in doing so, had tested the loyalty of those around her. During lunch with a group of colleagues, the tension thickened. Gina, a longtime ally, broke the silence. "You know, Emma, some people are not so thrilled about the way you handled your father's legacy. They don't want to face down their own fears." "You think I should have just glossed over the mistakes?" Emma retorted, trying to maintain her composure. The tightness in her chest made her voice waver. "It's not that simple," Gina replied softly. "There's a lot at stake, and not everyone is ready for that kind of vulnerability." This perception stung. Emma felt a familiar pang of doubt creeping in, gnawing at the confidence she had built. She had expected a level of resistance, but the reality of the pushback was disheartening. "But it's important to learn from failures, Gina. Can't they see that?" Gina shifted uncomfortably. Maybe they don't want to. Maybe they're too comfortable in their successes. The conversation hung heavy between them like an impending storm. Emma realized she needed a strategy not just to survive, but to thrive in an environment where change was met with fear. Beyond simple collaboration, she needed to actively cultivate the courage of her colleagues. The next few days entailed relentless preparation as Emma devised a plan. Her conversations transitioned from casual discussions to deliberate engagements. She sought out skeptics and allies alike, mapping out individual paths for each person who had once revered her father. Emma gathered stories of their successes and failures, learning about the hurdles they had faced behind closed doors. Slowly, she built rapport, creating a tapestry of shared experience that aligned her father's legacy with their narratives. As the weeks unfurled, the tensions morphed into dialogues, albeit fraught with apprehension. Emma organized informal sessions to share her vision on creating a culture of vulnerability and innovation. One afternoon, while recounting a pivotal moment her father had faced, an initiative that had flopped spectacularly, she saw glimmers of recognition among her peers. They were starting to engage with the uncomfortable truths she was advocating. But even with this progress, she sensed waves of backlash rising at the fringe. A small faction of her colleagues began to openly question her motives. Were they merely swirling around her in the current, seeking to unravel her influence? Or were they genuinely concerned for the work they had dedicated their lives to? Emma felt the ground beneath her shift. She understood now that true transformation would require navigating not only the fears of her peers, but also the fragile balance of her own sense of self within the legacy she had once feared would solely define her. As Emma prepared for yet another meeting, a message popped up on her phone. It was from Tobias, a senior physician known for his staunch adherence to tradition. "We need to talk. There's too much at stake." For a moment, Emma's heart pounded. Could this be the confrontation she had anticipated, or a chance to find common ground? The air was thick with uncertainty, yet beneath it all was a swirl of determination. What would she say? How would she address the doubts swirling around her now? Emma realized she stood at a pivotal juncture, and the next conversation would either fortify her resolve or plunge her deeper into doubt. She had to be ready to confront the very real opposition. It was time to face the escalating conflict head-on, and she could feel every nerve in her body primed for the challenge. Emma stared at her phone, the message an unsettling intrusion into her thoughts. She knew Tobias's resistance was emblematic of a deeper issue, a fear of change that threatened to suffocate any hope for growth within the department. Sudden clarity struck her. She had been looking at this as a battle, one side versus another, when it might be better approached as dialogue. As she walked toward Tobias's office, she mentally rehearsed her words, but they felt wooden, stiff with hesitation. What she needed wasn't a scripted rebuttal, but genuine engagement. Hesitation danced in her stomach, but she pushed through the threshold anyway. The door creaked open, and she was met with Tobias's piercing gaze, his brow furrowed as though she had just interrupted a critical thought. "Thank you for coming," he said, a faint note of surprise in his voice. Emma took a breath, steadying herself. The air was thick with unsaid words, a palpable tension that crackled like static electricity. "Tobias, I was hoping we could discuss the direction I've been advocating for," she began, meeting his eyes with resolve. Disgust suggests we're on equal footing, Emma, he interjected, crossing his arms. I don't think we are. Your approach challenges everything we've established here. You're flirting with chaos. Chaos or change, she replied, surprising even herself with the firmness in her tone. What I'm proposing is necessary. I know it's disruptive, but we've got to confront our past to secure a viable future. We can't keep ignoring the lessons, my father's lessons. Tobias leaned back, visibly taken aback. She sensed his defensiveness softening, if only slightly. You want us to build on his mistakes? That's a dangerous path. This was her moment. Emma understood now that she'd been operating under an assumption, believing that the legacy of her father would automatically engender respect. Instead, she needed to personalize her father's story, not just as an icon, but as a relatable human being, flawed and striving. Yes, I do, because those mistakes are part of who we are. Denying them only ties us to a history we seek to overcome. If we can own them, we can shift the narrative. And how exactly do you propose we do that? Tobias asked, skepticism mingling with curiosity. Emma inhaled deeply. I've started having conversations with the team, gathering stories about their struggles too. This isn't just about my father. I want us to create a shared space for vulnerability, an environment where we all feel safe to express our fears and challenges. The disbelief in his expression stirred something in Emma, a mix of determination and empathy. We can't keep working in isolation, wearing these masks. Together we can cultivate a culture of resilience. Don't you want that? The silence that followed was almost suffocating, inviting reflection rather than opposition. She could see the wheels turning in his mind. But was it enough? Emma had hitched her hopes to this conversation, anxious, yet determined to guide it toward constructive confrontation. She needed to remain steadfast. She had come too far to back down from her ambitions now. Tobias finally shifted forward, his arms unfolding slightly. You might have a point, but aren't you worried about the backlash? If you start addressing these issues openly, there's no telling how some will react. Emma felt her heart race. I know there's a risk, but at what point do we say enough is enough? Is the status quo worth the fear it perpetuates? His gaze softened, and she could see the walls he'd constructed beginning to crack. I might be willing to hear you out, Emma, but you need to proceed cautiously. Not everyone is ready for this kind of upheaval. Emma's hope surged. Then let's take small steps. Conversations, listening sessions, whatever it takes to change the narrative. I need your support, but more importantly, I want to hear your experiences too. Just as the possibility of agreement began to form a bridge between them, a sharp knock interrupted them. The door swung open, revealing Jaina, her expression a mix of urgency and concern. Emma, we need to talk. It's about the meeting coming up. There's major talk about your approach. Things are escalating. The warning hung heavily in the air. Emma's heart raced again, clashing with the newfound sense of hope. She had ventured to sway Tobias, but a tempest brewed just outside their conversation. Would she be able to navigate the storm they were heading toward? Are you ready for this? She questioned herself as she moved past Tobias, acutely aware that the landscape of her ambition had transformed yet again. The path forward was fraught with uncertainty, and as she met Jaina's anxious eyes, Emma understood she might need more than just conference room dialogues to emerge unscathed. What lay ahead was an escalating conflict, not just with her colleagues, but something deeper, an inner confrontation with her fears and aspirations. Would she find the courage to face it all? Flashes of doubt crossed her mind, but Emma steeled herself. She wouldn't waver now. Could this be the moment where she finally embraced the true essence of her father's legacy? Or would the fear of others prove too formidable to overcome? Emma followed Jaina down the corridor, her mind racing as the gravity of the situation loomed larger with each step. The urgency in Jaina's voice echoed in her ears, amplifying her anxiety. What had she unleashed? The conversations she had envisioned were no longer hypothetical. They were becoming a reality, and she felt the weight of that reality pressing against her chest. Inside the conference room, the tension was palpable. Colleagues gathered, some whispering amongst themselves, while others wore expressions of sharp disapproval. It struck Emma how swift opinions could shift. She had only begun to advocate for change, yet resistance was already mounting. She sensed the undercurrent of unease, a tidal wave ready to crash if she misstepped. I can't believe they're turning on you already, Jaina murmured, her fingers clenched tightly around her notebook. You've barely started. Emma shook her head, attempting to quell her fluttering pulse. It's not me they're turning against. It's the idea. We haven't even had the chance to unfold it. They don't understand. Sitting at the head of the table, Tobias gestured for silence, his face a mixture of authority and wariness. All right, everyone, let's get started. Emma has proposed a new direction for our department that I believe merits serious discussion. I'd like to hear your thoughts, but let's keep it respectful. Respectful, she thought bitterly. Would they even know how to be respectful given the firestorm of apprehension that swirled in the air? Emma, Tobias prompted, leaning forward. Why don't you present your ideas? Taking a deep breath, she felt the room's chilling energy wrap around her. Thank you everyone for being here. I want to share a vision for our department that acknowledges our past while pushing towards growth. My father's legacy is full of lessons, not just successes, but mistakes as well. Embracing our collective struggles can foster resilience and drive innovation. She glanced around the room, one by one, reading expressions of skepticism mixed with surprise. There was something unyielding about them, as if they were fortified against vulnerability. It stung, but she pressed on, holding on to the hope that transformation was possible. You're asking us to expose ourselves, our failures and fears, one of her colleagues, a seasoned manager named Lisa, challenged. That's risky, Emma. Not everyone is eager to dive into such personal territory. I understand that fear, Emma replied, summoning her composure. But isn't it riskier to remain stagnant? We're all human, and our experiences, good and bad, are what shape us. I propose we frame our discussions not as a blame game, but as learning opportunities. Can't we create a culture where it's okay to show up authentically? The air thickened with discomfort. Emma could taste the doubt, but also the flicker of curiosity. If she held the room's attention, it was vital to capitalize on that moment. Tobias interjected, his tone more neutral. Let's be real, change doesn't come without backlash. If we wade too far into vulnerability, some may feel exposed and defensive. We still have a business to run after all. Running a business is about adapting to change, Tobias, Emma shot back, her voice stronger than she felt. The most innovative companies thrive because they embrace discomfort, not sweep it under the rug. We can't take strides forward while dragging our past behind us unchecked. Another colleague chimed in, a voice of caution. What makes you think you're capable of guiding this shift? I think you're underestimating the challenge. Emma's stomach clenched. Beneath the challenge lay a raw truth, her self-doubt. Could she lead them through this evolution? Would they be willing to follow her? I might be new to this, but I'm passionate and committed, she countered, her voice fierce. We owe it to ourselves and our shared mission to try something different. It starts with dialogue. It starts with trust. As conversation swirled, Emma caught Gina's supportive nod from the corner of her eye. It fueled her resolve. The uproar around her was a challenge, not just from her peers, but from within. She recognized that this was not merely about departmental change. It was a chance to solidify her role in her father's legacy and carve a path for herself, unearthing her potential as a leader. Yet as the discussions grew more heated, the shadow of doubt whispered, reminding her of the risks ahead. Maybe some are right to be afraid, she thought. The meeting began to dissolve into scattered debates, but Emma could feel a shift. There were flickers of agreement beginning to spark among the dissenters. And somewhere in that turmoil, a new question arose within her. Was she truly prepared to face the resistance, both here in this room and within herself? The urgency for clarity surged within her. If she didn't galvanize this moment, would she falter? Are you ready to confront your own uncertainty? The question lingered, echoing in her mind as she realized this was just the beginning of a deeper journey, one where she would have to face every aspect of her fears, leveraging them to fuel her growth. As conversations continued, Emma felt the weight of that realization sink in. This was more than professional development. It was a personal odyssey toward authenticity. What would the next step reveal about herself? And could she rise in the face of adversity ahead? Amid the scattered debates that filled the conference room, Emma felt the atmosphere shift like quicksand beneath her feet. The murmurs ebbed and flowed, some colleagues morphing from skeptical to receptive, while others remained entrenched in their resistance. This was more than just a meeting. This was a reckoning. Maybe I should have anticipated this, she pondered, wrestling with the familiar anxiety that fluttered in her stomach. Her mind raced as she fought against the urge to retract, to retreat to the safety of silence. But lurking behind the doubt was a growing resolve, compelling her to embrace the very discomfort she sought to challenge. Ignoring the small voice that warned her to tread carefully, Emma leaned in on the opportunity presented by the resulting chaos. "What if we frame this differently?" she said, pulse quickening. "What if we approach our challenges not as failures, but as maps for success? Each misstep an indicator guiding our collaborative process?" Lisa, still skeptical, shot back. "So we wear our mistakes as badges of honor? That's a nice thought, Emma. But how will that impact our performance metrics? This isn't about feelings." The reaction was swift and divided, some nodding in contemplation, while others wore faces stony with disapproval. Emma sensed a spark igniting somewhere, but the flame was far from stable. It was a risk, inviting emotional openness into a setting that had always prized results above authenticity. Clenching her fists under the table, Emma wrestled with her convictions, wrestling not only with external challenges but facing the mirror of her self-worth. "I don't pretend to have all the answers," she replied, breathing deeply to maintain her composure. "But I do know that honest storytelling about our failures opens doors we rarely acknowledge are there." Above the fray of voices, she caught Tobias's gaze, his brow creased with contemplation. There was something in his eyes, a glimmer of respect mixed with uncertainty, which urged her to continue. "Change requires courage and vulnerability," Emma pressed on, her voice gaining momentum. "And perhaps this is exactly what we lack. Embracing our mistakes with honesty allows us to cultivate trust among one another." Jaina's subtle nod of approval suggested that she understood the transforming power of vulnerability. Maybe they could begin to transcend their differences, moving towards a shared vision, though a palpable fear still pulsed through Emma's veins. The discussions ebbed for a moment, and she seized the pause. "Let's think of our customers. What do they face every day? Are we not failing them by hiding behind our facades? If we open the floor for genuine exchange, it could catalyze essential change not just for us, but for the entire company." Murmurs of agreement began to bubble through the room, but doubt lingered, masked in confusion. There were still hard questions left to explore. Did she possess the resilience to usher those reluctant to embrace authenticity? Would she anger more than she converted? An unexpected ally emerged from the corner of the room. "Emma makes a valid point," Greg, an otherwise reticent team member, ventured. "If we don't share our stories, we risk being an echo chamber of what works for us now, but it may not be what works for our future." Emma's heart thudded in her chest. Could it be that flickers of insight were beginning to penetrate the dense wall of skepticism? But with that new illumination came a thicker fog of ambiguity. Was she equipped to lead them through that? The path forward laid out in abstract terms, but the steps remained muddled. An unsettling journey loomed ahead, one that would pull at her foundations, demanding far more from her than she'd anticipated. She needed clarity, a definitive direction to channel her energy into. The room was beginning to change, but could she adapt quickly enough to steer the momentum? As the meeting drew on, she recognized the imperative to proactively confront hidden aspects of her own insecurities, the very uncertainties she had tried to mask with assertiveness. This was a moment of truth, a boiling point for both her team and herself. Their apprehension mirrored her own, and the fight against self-doubt intensified within. What would it take to overcome their resistance? Could her awakening facilitate not only their transformation, but also her own? The question lingered in the air like an unspent arrow, pointing unerringly at the heart of what lay ahead. What awaited them all as they weather the storm together? Would they band together to forge a stronger foundation forged from collective bravery? Little did she know, the real test of her resolve was just beginning, and the next chapter of her journey toward authenticity would demand everything from her. As the dust settled after the thunderous exchange in the conference room, Emma found herself standing at a precipice, not just of her father's legacy, but her own emerging identity. The challenge of redefining the narrative surrounding both loomed large. She had dared to confront not only her colleagues' perceptions, but the whispers of doubt within herself, and now she was fully aware of the stakes. Days passed, each one more pivotal than the last. Emma continued to immerse herself in the intricacies of her father's patent, outlining clear plans for collaboration within her department. For every ounce of skepticism she met, she matched it with passion, digging deeper into the true nature of her father's story, the nuances that illustrated both brilliance and frailty. She reached out beyond her circle, inviting healthcare professionals, engineers, and ethical scholars into discussions. Slowly, momentum built around her idea. An informal think tank began to take shape, where the directive was clear. Every voice mattered. Emma's initial emotional turmoil transformed into a catalytic force, and her resolve hardened with every interaction. She empowered her peers to recognize their own struggles, evoking a shared commitment to improved patient care. Back at the hospital, Emma's colleagues began approaching her, eager to share their stories of hardship and success. These intimate discussions, previously hindered by professional barriers, unveiled a surprising depth of vulnerability across the team. The environment began to shift from one of apprehension to collaboration, bubbling with newfound creativity. Then came the meeting with Dr. Green, a conversation she had both anticipated and dreaded. His office, once a site of judgment, now felt like a space of potential understanding. As she entered, she was greeted with a tentative smile, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "Emma, I've been observing the changes," he admitted, gesturing for her to take a seat. "And I must say, what you've initiated is intriguing. Tell me more about your vision." The moment she had waited for. Emma felt a rush of adrenaline course through her as she articulated her transformation, the journey of distance between her father's unfulfilled dreams and their collective evolution. With every word she spoke, clarity crystallized within her. "Well, my father's journey, his challenges, those aren't just relics of the past," she articulated strongly. "They are steps upon which we can build a culture. We are striving for more than just patient care. We aim to innovate through collective awareness and shared vulnerabilities." Dr. Green's eyebrows furrowed with contemplation. "What you're suggesting is a challenging transformation. Innovation is rarely welcomed without resistance." "True, but the power of unity supersedes fear," she asserted, finding her footing with each phrase. "Through confronting our own uncertainties, we can foster resilience, and maybe, just maybe, lead to groundbreaking advancements." His gaze softened with consideration, and for the first time, she saw flickers of acknowledgement. "You're not merely advocating for your father's vision, you're redefining its place in today's realm." That recognition was a turning point, illuminating pathways she had only dreamed of. Her journey infused hope into her colleagues, inspiring them to look beyond their immediate responsibilities. They began tackling projects imbued with a sense of purpose and admission of their histories. Yet Emma wouldn't rest until she shared this newfound perspective with the broader community, the patients and families whose lives could benefit from their combined wisdom. She proposed a series of workshops, offering spaces within the hospital aimed at engaging stakeholders through storytelling and collective problem-solving. As the series of workshops kicked off, Emma stood before a diverse audience, her heart swelling with purpose. Here, amid nurses, doctors, and patients, she wove together threads of her father's ambition with the raw narratives of their shared experiences. The resonance of vulnerability reached deep into those present, creating a palpable sense of hope. Each workshop was filled with dialogues that transcended traditional hierarchies. Patients spoke, providers listened, and new ideas flourished from collaborative compassion. The hospital began to adopt initiatives focused not merely on healing, but on empowerment, a revolution of care fostered by genuine connection. In those moments, Emma transformed, not just as a daughter reclaiming her father's legacy, but as a leader who had cultivated the courage to face uncertainty, unlocking profound growth. She stood among her colleagues strengthened, no longer defined by fear, but entirely by resilience, a journey born from vulnerability leading to authentic strength. As the final workshop concluded, Emma stepped outside into the sunlight, feeling the weight of resignation lifting from her shoulders, replaced by a sense of fulfillment. She had widely embraced her father's aspirations while making them uniquely her own, nurturing a legacy that was not solely his but now intertwined with hers. She had conquered the fears that once held her back, proving to herself that she could chart her own course defined by compassion and grounded in honesty. Emma crossed the hospital's threshold with solid confidence, ready for the next steps ahead, now marked by her own crowning achievement as a transformed leader set to revolutionize patient care. This moment of commitment demanded action. It was time to broaden the reach of her efforts and amplify the message of shared vulnerability across the healthcare community. The transformation had ignited within her, and she knew it was more than just personal growth. It was a movement poised to rewrite the narrative of healthcare, beginning at her fingertips. So, to you, the reader, you need to subscribe now to catch the exclusive stories of personal transformation like Emma's journey. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm that spreads these vital messages. Comment below with your own reflections and theories about this powerful conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this extraordinary growth.